You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us. Hello, welcome, and thanks for joining us. This is Fresh Hell. I'm Annie, the American.
And I'm Johanna, the Austrian. Thank you for coming back for another episode. First, let me start with a sincere thank you once more for all the lovely messages and comments we got. There's one I would like to address in particular that caught my eye just before we were about to record. Hi Reba, thanks for both of your comments on our first part of the Czech Unterweger case. So that was the episode where I tried to clarify the usage of the word sex worker in the US compared to the usage of the word prostitute in Austria. And I completely agree with you, Reba. I definitely often sound like a fool while I try to navigate all the nuances of a foreign language and, listener base with mostly a foreign culture. It's not easy, but I'm thinking I better sound like a fool sometimes than saying something super offensive or maybe hurt a lot of feelings. I have to admit, it's often for me like walking
eggshells.
A minefield.
Broken glass.
Seriously. Because what is offensive in the US is nothing here and the other way around. So, yeah. However, thanks for your feedback. I hope you will still listen to the second part of the Czech Unterweger case. I promise you, it's super intriguing.
It was really good. It was fascinating. So, yeah. All right. Well, big news this week. The Golden State Killer pled guilty to 13 murders and kidnappings. So we know that Joseph DeAngelo, it seems like he was tied to almost 50 rapes and more than 120 home invasions, mostly in and around Sacramento and the San Francisco Bay Area, as well as Southern California.
Yeah, and this was in the 70s and 80s, and he was able to elude capture for such a long time. I'm barely scared when it comes to true crime, but hearing the recording from one of the phone calls back then gave me sleepless nights. And then seeing this sorry excuse of a human being when he got arrested. It was good though. I think we often make serial killers out to be these omnipotent beings. What are they often called? Super predators, I think?
Yeah.
And then you see this weak, fat old man and he whispers his guilty plea. Sorry for ranting, but he is one I truly despise the most out of all of them. What he did to his victims and the victims' families, it was just...
I know. And I heard it was all an act. So, the detectives, I don't know, this is hearsay, but I swear I read this. I think I might have heard Paul Holes talking about it, but something about how, the detectives watching him before the arrest, because they'd been watching him for a little bit, before they actually got him, and they had seen him out on his motorcycle, out doing yard work, and then he's arrested,
I read that too.
And he fucking Weinsteins himself up for the public, right? He's like, oh, look at me, I'm so feeble and fragile with my walker.
It's the old Mata Marek trick.
Exactly. Yeah. But you remember when they found out who it was, they used genealogical DNA. So they had the DNA of the rapist and murderer, and they had samples that were preserved enough to get that DNA. So they knew it was the same person. There was never a match. They uploaded it to a genealogical database, and that's how they found him. He was like the third cousin of someone who had uploaded their info, and it was enough to narrow down the suspect pool enough to get him.
I think just recently there was another case where they used one of the databases. I'm not entirely sure though, if I remember correctly.
I think you're right. I just can't think exactly which one it is. Both of our brains are a little bit Swiss cheese lately. We're fine. But when they found Golden State Killer, I remember crying because I just kept thinking of Michelle McNamara and that she'd had a hand in it from the other side.
I know. Same. If our listeners don't know what we're talking about, please read I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara.
Yeah.
There's also a podcast. It only has a couple of episodes, but it's more of a behind the scenes of making of the book. It's quite interesting as well.
It is, definitely. And her husband, Patton Oswalt, was quite involved and has been involved. And please check all of this out. It's so good. And she passed away before finishing it. And now there's a documentary also called I'll Be Gone in the Dark on HBO. Have you seen any of it yet? We've watched the first episode, and so far it's really well done, and I'm glad they have so much audio and video of her.
I haven't watched it yet. I don't know. I just can't watch TV at the moment. It's something that makes me too sad. My dad and I often talked about newest TV shows and movies, and I think I got my love for movies from him. But I will be able to watch it at one point, I'm sure, and it's very high on my list.
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely understand that, and I know you'll enjoy it when the time comes. Well, today's story, it's not the story of the capture of the Golden State Killer, but it is one that I feel has the potential to finally be solved, maybe using genealogical DNA. Today we're going to talk about the unsolved murder of Peggy Andrews in Columbus, Ohio.
I don't know, the name rings a bell, but I don't know where to place it. Are there any warnings for our listeners?
Well, we're going to be talking about sexual assault and murder, so I hate to say it's kind of the norm for the genre, but it's kind of the norm for the genre. So, Mary Margaret Andrews was born on May 3rd, 1943 in Wintersville, Ohio, to Alex and Mary Andrews. Peggy, as she was called by everyone, was a very kind, loving, and intelligent girl, and her parents absolutely adored her. They lived in an unassuming small house in a nice neighborhood, and I don't mean nice in the, expensive houses way, although it could have been, I'm actually not sure, but what I mean is that it was the more important kind of nice neighborhood. It was really a true neighborhood. People were friendly, and they knew each other, and they looked out for each other. I think one of the reasons that, when we moved to Cape Cod, it was really tough when we had moved from Western Mass, because when we lived in Long Meadow, we knew the whole street, and I remember hanging out at all the houses on the street because, of course, our parents were always hosting barbecues or pool parties or movie nights, and when I say our parents, I mean the kids on the street, not specifically. My parents didn't do that every week. It was, traveling parties. But you knew whose house had brand name snacks, whose house you'd get spanked at if you got in trouble, whose parents were super lax about movie ratings, as long as you didn't tell your parents, who had an Atari in the basement, who had the best record collection, that kind of neighborhood.
Wait, you got spanked by other kids' parents?
Yeah. Did you never?
No.
Yeah. Some kids' parents were spankers, and if you all got in trouble, you would all be getting swatted as you were racing out the door, trying to get away into someone else's house with the good snacks and the Atari in the basement. It was the 80s. It was a different kind. You knew going in that if you got in trouble in that house, you were going to get a smack, so no one was ever surprised. But yeah, it was good. It sounds bad, but it was good. So it was that kind of neighborhood, though, that kind of everyone knew everybody else. So when Peggy was 7, her brother Patrick was born, which I would imagine for a 7-year-old girl, that's got to be the dream, right? You were 11 when your little sister was born. Do you remember it? Were you excited or stuck babysitting or?
I was not excited at all. I was never stuck babysitting, but it's gonna sound super bratty, but I loved being an only child, and I was not only an only child, but I was the first baby in that generation as well, so I got a lot of attention. But I do love my baby sister. I'm so unbelievably proud of her, especially during those last few weeks.
Oh, yeah, of course. I was 2 when Moose was born, and apparently I, introduced myself to her formally. Like, hi, I'm your big sister, Anne. And then when I realized she wasn't particularly interactive yet, I just abandoned her for the horsey swing. Which, to be fair, she's not mad about it. She understands. She doesn't hold grudges.
I love it. I can picture you, but I'm actually amazed that you didn't break out into a show tune when you introduced yourself, like, hello, my baby, maybe, or something like that.
I know. Oh, God, I love it. All right. So, yeah, but Peggy seems to have been a really great kid. So my primary, most favoritist, bestest source for this article is by Michelle Sullivan for Columbus Monthly. And I'll link to it, of course. It's referenced like every other article that you read, modern article that you read about this case. It just references back to Michelle Sullivan's article. So thank you for some really great reporting, Michelle. So in this article, her brother Patrick is quoted as saying, quote, "She was the apple of my mother and father's eyes. She was very loving, very caring," end quote. So the article goes on. It talks about her neighborhood remembering the hayride they had for her 16th birthday party. Theirs was just, it was like the house where all the kids would hang out on the weekend, and she was popular, but she was also really kind. She would always include, people that were new to town or the less popular kids. She was also very religious. She attended a Catholic high school and she went to mass every morning. She got very good grades and was good at math and wanted a career as an accountant or an auditor. But I read that she had also not ruled out possibly becoming a nun, which made me laugh a little bit when I read it because my parents' late great dog Maggie was named Margaret Mary after a nun my mom had in school. So she loved math and Jesus. Could be worse. All right, so right after she graduated from high school in 1961, she moved to Columbus, Ohio, and one of Peggy's cousins lived there, and so her parents, they knew they had a niece there, they supported the move, they supported her decision to take classes at the Columbus Business University, which is now the Bradford School, by the way, and I think she went to school full-time for a year, and then she got a job as a secretary to an accountant while taking classes 2 nights a week. So she lived in a boarding house on 18th Avenue, and she shared a room with 2 other young women, both called Carol. I know everyone's last name in this story, but for privacy, I'm leaving them out. They're in the articles for sources if you need them. And speaking of names, they must have had a nickname for one or both of the Carols.
Oh, they must have. It would have been way too confusing otherwise.
Right? There had to have been some kind of system there. So she's living with the Carols in their room in a boarding house that had 18 co-eds, all girls, I believe, and 2 house mothers.
Okay, so that sounds like a safe situation for a young woman living on her own for the first time, and I can see why the parents were quite comfortable with that arrangement.
Yeah, it was absolutely ideal, and I'm sure that everybody felt really good about it, as they should. So her brother Patrick basically says that her parents were just really pleased that she was out in the world and experiencing adult life for herself. Her parents were probably like, maybe you don't want to be an accountant or a nun. Maybe get out there and meet some people. There are other things you can do. But no, she was doing great. She was out in the world, experiencing adult life for herself, surviving in the wild, so to speak, before making any big life decisions. And everything was great. She was doing well in school. She had good friends and a good job. And her first year was a success. So now it's Thursday, September 20th, 1962, and 19-year-old Peggy leaves her office downtown at 5 p.m. to go to class. After class, she was talking with the Carols and 2 of her male classmates, and normally after class, she and the Carols would take the bus home, but she just wasn't feeling very well that day, so her friend and classmate Ron offered to give Peggy a ride so that she could skip the bus trip, which I get. If you've ever not felt well and then had to get on a bus, I get it. So one of the Carols had run errands earlier that day, and she'd bought herself some clothes. And so she gave Peggy I think it was one of those old-fashioned, the big bag, paper bags that was at the Bloomingdale's, the big brown bag. Was it Bloomingdale's? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember going to the mall as a teenager and you'd be walking around with all these little bags and then you'd go to Macy's and you'd just say, oh, could I have a large bag so I can put everything inside one bag? So I always imagine that kind of thing. And so she says to Peggy, would you mind taking this back for me? And Peggy's like, of course, I'll take it back in the car and then you don't have to schlep it home on the bus. Great. So Ron drives Peggy home the 3 miles from school back to the boarding house. He saw her walking to the house under the bright light of a streetlight, and thinking she was perfectly safe, he didn't wait to see that she was inside before taking off to meet his friends at a local bar. He arrived about 9:30, and she really should have been perfectly safe.
Oh, I get goosebumps because I can already sense that, of course, she was not perfectly safe. And that's why I always did. And that's also what my friends did in return for me. They always waited for me to get into my home.
Yeah.
One of my friends would even wait until I walked up 5 stories and she could see me turn on the light in our apartment.
Yep, same. It was always the same with me and my friends. And yeah, it was a different time,
Yeah.
But I'm sure, I'm sure Ron also didn't know that just the night before, less than a mile from Peggy's house, a woman had called police after she was held at gunpoint outside her home. She was returning home when she was accosted by a man with a gun who made her unlock her door and let him inside of her home. And then he forced her to perform, all it says is he forced her to perform perform a sex act. And that's all we need to know, really. At some point, the girl was able to get the attention of a roommate who came out of his room and confronted the man. The man fired 2 shots before taking off. I don't know if he shot at them or just in the air to frighten them away from chasing him, but either way, neither of them were shot, and those bullet or casings, whatever, they were able to retrieve the evidence at the crime scene. But it's the next night, and Ron probably didn't know that this had happened. Maybe he would have had her flash that porch light if he had, because Peggy was always known to go through the gate and to the back door. So the 2 Carols get home off the bus about 9:30, and they were a little bit surprised to see that Peggy wasn't back yet. They kept listening for the squeak of the gate hinges to kind of announce her arrival back, but they finally gave up and they went to bed around 10:30. In the meantime, the 2 house mothers sat in the kitchen drinking tea and waiting up for the resident that was least likely to break the rules and worrying about what might have happened, because the midnight curfew had come and gone, and they finally went to bed around 12:30 in the morning. Okay, now we're going to rewind back that same day, because there's another storyline to follow. A young man named Gary and 2 or 3 of his friends were moving into a house on Woodruff Avenue that they were renting near the Ohio State campus. So all day they've been dragging stuff into the house. You all know how moving works. I'm not going to explain it. And then I think they're just taking turns showering before bed when one of Gary's roommates realizes that he has left the windows down in his 1953 Buick, which is parked near a garage in the alley behind the house. But he's just showered and he's in his pajamas, so being a nice guy, Gary's like, "It's no problem, I'm still dressed. I'll run out and roll your windows up," which, it's the same sort of situation we've all been in at one point, right? We've all done that. Yeah, like if you and I were in a hotel room and I'd already put on a ratty old t-shirt to sleep in, but you hadn't changed yet, and I was like, "Oh shoot, I meant to get a orange soda from the vending machine."
Very likely that I haven't changed because I'm in my pajamas all day.
I was just gonna say. It's going to be great if we ever get to do live shows. People are going to expect us in this elaborate Victorian garb, and we're just going to shuffle out looking like the dude. It's fine. It'll be in our rider. We just want a big, comfortable sofa. Give us a fuzzy blanket. We'll just climb into bed together. Perfect. So Gary leaves the house. It's late. It's after 11:30. And so he cuts across the backyard, heading for the alley that runs between the street that they live on. And I think it's an alley that's between the street they live on and the street where Peggy's house is. And I used to live in an alley in a garbage can near a stoop. Sorry. As soon as I would write alley, I start thinking of Oscar the Grouch, but it was a death trap of an apartment over a garage near the Fountain of Youth tattoo parlor in St. Augustine.
Okay, wait, was it the poltergeist apartment or the one where the landlord's friend or something had a key? Or wait, was it the same?
Yeah, they were the same.
Oh God.
I know.
That apartment had everything.
This place has everything. It had fleas. It had no heat or air conditioning. It had outside ivy that was growing on the outside of the garage. It was growing inside the house. Yeah, it was bad. And it had a poltergeist and then some rando handyman that the owner gave a key to, and you'd wake up and he'd be in your room staring at you in the morning. It was great. Yeah, but in some neighborhoods, usually older ones, I think, before space was a super premium, you'd have a street and then an alley and then a street and then repeat, right? And so the alley would be between the backyards of the 2 streets on either side, and that's where parking spots were, where the garages were, trash collection sometimes would be up the alley, that kind of thing. And I don't know why I feel like I have to explain this to people, except that until I lived in St. Augustine, alleys were just things that you saw in big cities like New York or Boston, and they were just dark and creepy and full of dumpsters, and it's where people find bodies in movies. And
I'm also thinking of things like the Wonder Years or some show where the kids would climb over the fence in the backyard and then they would end up in the alley and there they would meet and go on adventures. You know what I mean?
Yes, so that's this kind of thing. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. It's late and it's dark and Gary's walking slowly because he literally just moved here. He doesn't know the area well yet at all. He's headed for that cinder block garage that his friend's car is parked near. It's not in the large garage. That had been empty all day. It was huge. It fit 6 cars. I'm not certain what property the garage belonged to, but in a few of the crime scene photos we have, you can see a for rent sign on it. But it really doesn't matter. What does matter is that as he approached the previously empty garage, something caught his eye. Something pale, caught just the littlest bit of moonlight. Maybe a sack of something is now being stored there. But as he's getting closer, he sees a second one. And he's like, huh. And so he looks a little bit more closely, and he realizes slowly, with growing horror, that he's looking at a pair of legs. So he runs back to his house and his friend, saying that he hoped he'd imagined it, but he thought he might have just seen a dead body. And they didn't have a phone, so the two jumped in the car and drove to a nearby diner and called the police. Unfortunately, when the police arrived, they confirmed Gary was right. It was a dead body, and it was Peggy. To quote Michelle Sullivan, quote, "She still wore her secretary's attire, a white blouse buttoned to the top, a brown sweater with brass buttons, and a tan skirt that fell below the knees. The back of her long red coat was covered with dirt as if she'd been dragged or rolled from her back. She wore her Steubenville Catholic Central High School class ring and a silver wristwatch. A small black bow was pinned in her brown curly hair. The contents of her leather purse were scattered, including an open red billfold. She lay on her left side, her right arm draped across her body." End quote.
This is so sad.
I know. It could be my mom. It's like the same ages as my parents, and yeah. So police questioned local neighbors to see if anyone had heard anything. And the family that lived in the house next door to the one Gary was renting, they reported that they were watching TV until about 9. And then the boys, the oldest was 13, they'd gone up to get ready for bed. And they came back down complaining they were hungry, but their mom was practicing shorthand. And so they made themselves some before bed sandwiches, because kids at this age are bottomless wells and will eat you out of house and home.
Oh my god, yes. If you have teenagers over and you see them eating, it's like the eating scene of No Face in Spirited Away. Like, seriously.
Yeah. They can, yeah. I feel like the puppy's the same way right now. It's like, eat, growth spurt. So, as they were eating, their dog, who I was a bit sad, his name and breed, or hers, are never mentioned, but the dog begins to growl. And so, Mary Elizabeth, their mom, she gets up and turns on the outside floodlight and lets the dog out, which I thought was a little weird, because if my dog is suddenly growling, I don't think I'm just going to open up the door and be like, off you go, have fun with whatever's got your hackles up. Like, who are these people?
Right, but we are overprotective dog parents, and these were different times.
That's very true.
Also, one of our Hellions was right, because we definitely need a "Who Are These People" t-shirt.
We do. It's one of those things I didn't realize how often I say it. There are a lot of things like that. Some I'm trying to work on saying less frequently, but yeah, I'd like that on a face mask. And Opus needs a Hellion bandana. We need to get dog bandanas, I think. We need a lot. So the dog goes out, and then the dog starts barking, and they hear a loud bang, and then 3 more fast bangs, which they all assumed were fireworks. So they did live near the university and several frat houses, so maybe the dog liked to bite frat boys, and that's why they let him out. Who can say? I'm not judging. I'm just not letting my dog out if he's growling. I asked Paul, I was like, babe, would you if the dog just started growling right now, would you just open the door and let him out? And he looked at me like I asked him how many unicorns he wants for Christmas this year. He was just like, what? It seems at best like a skunking waiting to happen. So you don't have skunks in Europe, but have you ever seen one when you were over here?
No, I haven't. And I'm actually glad we don't have them. Leela would probably become best friends with one and get sprayed all the time because she loves everything that's extra stinky. She rolled around in human feces and human vomit, and she loves it. One time she rolled in something so wild that I washed her 3 times with tomato sauce, which actually usually works with her, but after 3 times her fur was pink and she still smelled horribly.
Oh, I thought tomato juice is an old wives' tale. I think it's now.
No, that works really well.
Does it?
Usually.
Oh, I don't know. I think now it's like liquid dish soap and peroxide. I can tell you one thing, it's not douche.
But I would love to see a skunk in real life. I think they look super cute, and I always have to think of Bambi's friends.
Yeah, I love them. I think they're incredibly cute. And apparently, if you have them descented as babies, they make pretty good pets, actually. If we didn't have a dog, they'd be one of my favorites. So I ended up looking this up to confirm because you know how my brain works. My notes are weird. And I found this little tidbit of information on them in a PBS article. I'm going to link to it. There's no author credited. It's just like PBS Online. So it turns out skunks used to be in the same family as otters, weasels, and badgers because they were so similar, including a, quote, squat body, strong claws for digging, enlarged anal glands, and musty anal secretions. But skunks have even larger anal glands, and instead of a duct that secretes scent markings, skunks spray their scent from nipples in the anal gland that can be precisely aimed and controlled, end quote. So that's terrifying. Nipples in the anal gland that can be precisely controlled. It just seems like something wrong for something so cute and fluffy, and they waddle all wonkily. I'm pretty sure that's where the term drunk as a skunk comes from, because they just sort of fucking stumble all over the place. That's just how they walk. Even when they're totally sober. So something else we have in common. So seriously, though, that's enough about the absolute hell that is a skunked dog. Let's take a quick break for a word from today's sponsor, Best Fiends.
Are you tired of the same old boring puzzle games?
I am.
Are you tired of the same challenges over and over again and levels that are just impossible to beat?
Yes, I really am. I'll eventually just give up if I can't beat a level in a few days. It's no longer fun, it's become a chore, and I lose interest.
Do you wish your online puzzle games had more cute, creepy crawlies?
Always. I'm always happy to see a frog or a lizard or an axolotl.
Then you absolutely have to download Best Fiends. Use charming, adorable fiends strategically to defeat the slugs.
Thanks for the great tip. I'm sure gonna check out this puzzle game. It sounds swell.
Engage your brain with fun puzzles and collect tons of cute characters. Trust us, with over 100 million downloads, this 5-star rated mobile puzzle game is a must-play. Download Best Fiends free on the Apple App Store or Google Play.
That's friends without the R. Best Fiends. Back to the reason we're here, the crime.
Okay, so the family of the dog, yeah? Did they see or hear anything else?
So apparently one of the kids went out to see what was going on, because sure, your dog's out there growling. Send one of the kids out to see what's happening. Again, I know.
Sounds reasonable.
It's a different time. He was 13.
I'm sure he was a very mature 13-year-old.
You had to be at that time, right? So in any case, he told the cops that he'd seen 2 cars who gunned their engines and took off down the alley, but the police believed that those cars were just drag racing and not related to what had happened in the garage.
What did happen in the garage?
Okay, now I have to stop making small talk about skunks and get to the sad stuff. So I'm once again going to quote Ms. Sullivan's article, quote, "An autopsy found Peggy had been shot 3 times in the head. There were 3 bullet wounds on her face caused by a small caliber weapon, as well as a jagged wound near her hairline. The autopsy report does not specify what caused the 4th wound, but detectives suggest it could have been the butt of the gun or the impact of her fall. Another bullet hole was found in the collar of her coat. The palms of her hands were dirty, but her short nails were clean. There was black dust on the soles of both of her feet, even though her left shoe was still in place. Both her girdle and underwear had been ripped, and her garter had been torn off. Her slip had been rolled up. Semen was found on the back of her skirt, though the autopsy determined she hadn't been raped." End quote.
Okay, that's horrible, but also really interesting details.
I know. So it seems they learned her identity early the next morning when the Carrolls and the house mothers woke up and realized Peggy had never come home. And they found her books neatly stacked on the back steps next to the shopping bag that Carol had asked her to take home. And that's when police realized that she lived only a block or so away from where she was murdered. They think, and I agree, that it seems that somebody was waiting back there with a gun and that she calmly put her things down and then did as she was told, at least to a point.
Or it would have been possible that she knew the person and walked away with them voluntarily. Or maybe the person asked for help, like a Ted Bundy situation, not exactly like that, because that would have been suspicious at that place at the time of day, but, something of that kind.
Yeah, that's absolutely possible that someone had asked her for help with something, because she seems really very much like the kind of person who would do anything to help somebody.
I also wonder about her dirty feet, even though one shoe was still on. So did he put the shoe back on, or were her feet dirty before? Which wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, because it's not as if she just came from a barefoot walk somewhere.
Yeah.
She was all made up nicely for work.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, no, I wondered, do you think maybe she had fought back when she realized it would be a rape and not just a robbery? Well, I was going to say there used to be. I would say there still is in a lot of the world and a lot of families. Like, virginity is very important to a lot of people. You know what I mean? So maybe she really got her hands and feet dirty trying to get away from him, and then that's why he decided to kill her.
Yep. But then she would have dirt under her fingernails, and her shoe would not be on, and you would see the struggle in the dirt in where she was lying in the surroundings.
That's true. There's no mention of that, so I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
And I also don't know how much the police know that isn't public knowledge. I assume there must be certain things that have been not disclosed, right? Just so that,
definitely.
Just in case.
But the no dirt under the fingernails is really weird, because if I'm fighting...
Yeah. Did she start to fight and try to get away? And that's when he just immediately killed her instead of assaulting her like the woman the night before. You just wonder, like, was the first shot maybe the one that passed through her collar? And then the other 3 shots that were in quick succession were to her face, and hopefully it was really quick. And I don't know why he didn't rape her. I mean, if he had undressed her partially, that may have been all the stimulation he needed. But those details are still unsettling. Generally, a sexual assault you don't empathize with, but you understand that need for power or control. But in this case, was it the murder itself that was sexually gratifying, or the undressing?
Maybe he suffered from premature ejaculation. I think many rapists suffer from some sort of sexual problem, and, that often leads to anger and hating of women, if you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean, and I think it's a very likely possibility.
Okay, so were there any suspects maybe in her surrounding?
Yeah, well, I think they pretty quickly linked it to the assault the night before, so they were able to interview that victim again, and her description of her attacker was a white man, young, small build, and they drew up a very creepy-looking sketch.
I mean, are they ever not creepy looking?
No, actually, they're always creepy. I hate them. I think they're so creepy. They give me nightmares. Not anymore, but when I was a kid, they did. Like, if I was watching the news and I saw a police sketch, I'd have nightmares about it. But yeah, they interviewed all of her friends from high school. There was just nobody who would want her dead. There wasn't even really a boyfriend, really. She was described as just being sort of too religious for any sort of serious boyfriend. So I think we can describe her as being quite chaste. And since moving to Columbus, there had just been work and school, some time with friends, but not much. And again, just no behavior at all that would indicate it was somebody that she knew. Ron, who had driven her home, he was taken into custody and interviewed immediately. His car was very thoroughly searched. I read they just went over that with a fine-tooth comb. And he had a paraffin test done for gunpowder residue. So I've heard paraffin tests before. I've heard that mentioned before, but I was never entirely sure what that entailed. And sure enough, it sounds like exactly like more or less what you get if you get paraffin at the spa added to a manicure or a pedicure. So they dip your hands in paraffin wax over and over and over again, and then they let it dry, and then they remove the wax cast of your hand. And then they use chemicals. They listed the chemicals, but I'm not going to repeat them because I'll pronounce them wrong, and it doesn't really matter, to determine if there's nitrates from gunpowder, which will turn blue if detected. And I read about this, most of this in oddly enough, a blog about the JFK assassination, which was a year after Peggy's murder. And even then it seems that the science was kind of iffy at best. A lot of false negatives, a lot of false positives, because nitrates are in all sorts of things. But the bottom line is he was cleared. Gary, who had found her body, and all of his roommates were also taken in and questioned and cleared. I believe they all passed polygraphs as well. So then the police started looking at known sex offenders in the area. They had interviewed 60 of them by the end of that week with no leads. They even started to just randomly question and bring people in for questioning on the street if they looked a bit iffy.
Ah, good old Hail Mary move.
I know. It seems like they tried everything. 10 detectives were assigned to the case, and they followed up on every one of the hundreds of leads that came in. Nothing. So then, a little over a year later, in the fall of 1963, a .22 caliber gun was found in the university storm drain, and tests were done to see if it was the same gun that had fired the bullets in the sexual assault and in Peggy's murder. And they were all consistent and look right, so basically, investigators think that they were fired from that gun, but they can't say with absolute certainty that that was the right weapon. They did find the owner of the gun. He was a student that lived pretty close to Peggy when she was murdered, but he claimed that the gun had been stolen. He just hadn't reported it because he wasn't completely sure if it had been stolen or maybe he had left it in a car or something, which... what the fuck? I don't know how you just don't know where your gun is.
Wait, okay, are you not responsible for your gun in the States? I mean, like here, the guns have to be locked away as soon as others live with you or have access to your house, yeah? And if it gets stolen, you have to immediately report it because you are otherwise in such big trouble if the gun is used for whatever,
yes.
Yeah, for whatever evil intent. You're trying to tell me that this dude didn't know the whereabouts of his gun for over a year? Like, that seems pretty iffy to me.
I wish I could say it's really iffy, but it doesn't make me bat an eyelid in this country. So, yeah, responsible gun owners behave the way you just described. Like most of my friends and family who own guns are very safe and educated and keep them locked up. But laws here vary state by state as to what's required. And it's nowhere like, so family in the UK, right? So my father-in-law for hunts, shoots. Hunting. And over there, guns always have to be locked in a gun cabinet, and he's the only one with a key. I'm sure it's similar to where you are.
Yeah.
But that's really rare here. So, long story short, it's absolutely plausible and not particularly surprising that he could totally forget where a gun was. Yeah, sad to say that wouldn't make me bat an eye. He was cleared, though. He passed a polygraph, and it was also around this time I read just one article that mentions a series of garage fires in Columbus in November of 1962. And at that time, there were a lot of speculation that it could be possibly the same person, but I was not really able to find much more about the fires or if whoever was starting those fires had been found. I don't know if it was ever proven to be related. In any case, they're still working on Peggy's case, and the case file is huge, just pounds and pounds of material. Witness statements, interviews, crime scene photographs, you name it, they had it. But they had something else they didn't realize at the time. They had the semen stain on her skirt. And thankfully, the evidence was all stored well. Thankfully, the evidence was all stored properly. And so in the year 2000, 20 years ago, forensics was able to extract a usable DNA sample, and they ran it against all of the databases.
And did it get a hit?
They did not. And in case you're wondering, they did rule out the guy who may have lost or had his gun stolen. It wasn't him. He did willingly give a DNA sample to compare.
Or it wasn't him alone.
Or it wasn't him alone. That's a very good point. But I don't think he had anything to do with it. I think it was just a random gun. Or it was stolen from him and used in the crime if it was the right gun. The thing that's exciting is they could still find the man who murdered her, and that's what brings us back to how this case reminded me of the Golden State Killer, because one of the things I just love about the forensic sciences is how much better it's getting at such a quick rate. And so they now have this killer's DNA, and so there's hope, because even if he's long dead, he could have a kid or a grandkid or a cousin out there who has submitted their DNA, and that's how they eventually stopped Golden State Killer. Unfortunately, Mary Margaret Andrews' case is still unsolved. Her brother still lives in the house that they grew up in. Peggy's parents have both passed away, and they're now buried with their daughter. But Patrick is still very much hoping to get an answer one day.
I'm always so glad when the evidence is stored properly for decades.
Yeah.
Because how many times did we see that evidence got lost or was destroyed? be it by accident or on purpose. It always infuriates me because I agree, it is fascinating to see how far investigational methods have come, but it's also exciting to imagine how much more is still to come. And it's so satisfying when old cold cases get solved decades later.
I know. And I really wonder sometimes, and I hope that, so many of the laws that we have in our books in terms of the statute of limitations on certain things, I hope that starts to change. And the other really big issue we have is ending the backlog. So we have just thousands and thousands, and is it millions? It's an unbelievable number of rape kits that are still untested.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's when I first heard that, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a charity that we give to pretty frequently, is endthebacklog.org, to help finance getting those kits tested to see, because there's so much information there, right? I mean, you could have you could run 50 of those and find that they were all the same person. And how fucking horrifying is that, right? They could have another Golden State Killer in there. Yeah, that is the absolutely tragic death of Peggy Andrews.
Thank you. I really think I heard her name, but now that you told me the story, I'm not quite sure. And it's sad to say because there are so many cases like hers.
So many. Yeah, there really are. And this is one, I can't even remember how I found this one. Apologies if anybody recommended it. But yeah, I just never heard anything about it. And so I was glad to tell her story. So do we have anything good to share this week?
Yes, should I go first?
Yes, please. Everyone's sick of my voice.
So my something good this week is about one of our Hellions. Her name is Sue, and she's a silversmith and the owner of Lulu Bug Jewelry. And Annie, you have to check out her Instagram. Like, she makes such beautiful pieces, from animal pendants to more quirky and macabre stuff. Everything is right up our alley, and she uses traditional silversmith techniques. And on her Instagram, she even posts videos about the process. And I swear to God, I was mesmerized last night when I checked out her art. I have such extreme respect for people who can do such beautiful pieces all by hand. I'm so clumsy, I can't even begin to describe with words how clumsy I am. One piece is a hand that holds a heart, and on the backside, like, the hand has like a ring of, what is the red stone that you bought in Prague?
Oh, garnets.
A garnet, yes, it's with a garnet. It's beautiful.
I love garnets.
She also has some really quirky stuff. She has these pendants in the shape of a skull, and the skull has one wonky eye. I don't even know which of her pieces I love the most. I'm just not a fan of the spiders, even though they are beautifully grafted. I had to scroll past them.
Oh, yeah.
Please do yourself a favor and check out her Instagram. It's called Lulubug Jewelry, all in one word.
Nice. I'm definitely going to check it out. She reminds me of Ania. I love that kind of work. Yeah, I'm looking forward to looking at it. So mine is the new series of Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix. So I caught up on a few episodes this past weekend, and I'm hooked again. I think I'm going to burn through these episodes really fast. I miss Robert Stack, but the first 2 episodes, I'm really looking forward to talking to you about them. Yeah, you have to let me know when you've watched them, because I have a lot of really...
I will.
big thoughts and feelings, and I don't know who to talk to about them. So I'm gonna need you to go ahead and watch that when you have a chance, please. But it's good. It's good. It's 1 story per episode, so it's a little bit of a different format.
Definitely gonna check it out as soon as I'm able to watch things again.
Yeah. I get it. I understand. But thanks, everybody, very much for tuning in for another episode of Fresh Hell. And if you want to know how to contact us, or how to buy merch, or where you can find us on Instagram and Twitter, you can find all of that on our website, which is www.freshhellpodcast.com. That's right?
Yes, and you can also find us on Facebook, and we have a Facebook group that's closed. If you search for Fresh Hell Murder, it's gonna pop right up. I think that's the easiest way actually to contact us, via Facebook and via email.
Yeah, for sure. We're there all the time. Yeah, it's like my safe space on Facebook right now. It's all just like weird, quirky animals, house porn, up-to-date news stories on current murders. It's great. Thank you very much for listening. If you have just a moment, we would be ever so grateful if you would just take just the tiniest moment of your day to leave us a really quick review, we would be ever so grateful.
And please do us a favor and say hi to all your pets, your dogs, your skunks, your wallabies, your guinea pigs, your rats,
your birds,
your axolotls, all of them. We love them all.
We love them all. And if you're going through hell,
keep going. Tschüss.
See you next week.